Hello and welcome to lesson 3 in the series of videos on UK challenges. Today's challenge is going to be landscape challenges. So within that we're going to be looking at the UK's national parks, their location and the principles behind their conservation and development, which are a little bit contradictory. We're going to be looking at river and coastal flooding risk in the UK with a couple of case studies, the Somerset levels for rivers and the 2013 storm surge for coasts, and we're going to be looking at solutions to those types of UK flood risk. Alright, so the very first task I'd like you to try and do is to try and plot the 15 national parks of Great Britain. So you can see the little green areas on the map to the right of the screen. They are all recognised UK national parks. We're going to go into what those are actually, that means in a moment, but for now I just want to see if you can locate any of them. I hope you can locate at least one or two, but ideally you should be able to do sort of 5 or 6 just from kind of memory. If you're not sure, then when you unpause the screen, then they'll all be revealed. Okay, so pause the screen now, have a go, get your family involved as well, see if they can remember all of them. Okay, so the answers to the National Parks Challenge are here. Here they are all listed. So hopefully you identified the Broads, because we are a Norfolk-based school, so you should know where those are. The South Downs here, you've got the New Forest, which is one of our case studies for the ecosystems topic. You've got Dartmoor and Exmoor, the Brecon Beacons, you've got the Pembrokeshire coast, the Snowdonia area, the Peak District, the North York Moors here, the Yorkshire Dales, the Lake District, Northumberland up here, Loch Lomond and the Trossachs, and the Cairngorms there. Okay, so there we go, got a number of, 15 to be exact, national parks in the UK. And the national parks were set up in 1951, so they're pretty old now. They're celebrating at the time of recording their 60th birthday, 70th birthday, I should say. There are 15 of them in the UK. I've mentioned that a couple of times now. And the idea was they're to protect and promote areas of beautiful countryside, wildlife habitats, and cultural heritage. So there's a number of things within that. All of them are essentially beauty spots. They're places which are incredibly lovely to go and visit. There's lots of nature, lots of wildlife, nice vistas, views, and a lot of the wildlife within them is often protected because they are protected. And one of the reasons they're protected is because of their wildlife and the habitats that they create. There's also an aspect of cultural heritage within there. So practices have historically gone on in those areas are allowed to continue. So for example, in the Norfolk Broads, one of the historical practices which actually helped create it in the first place was actually reed cutting. And the reed cutting was to collect thatch for the roofs of houses. And reed cutting is actually essential for continuing the habitat of certain species found within the Broads, and actually only found within the Broads in some cases. And similar is true in places like the Lake District. There's lots of farming practices that go on within the Lake District National Park and other parts of the UK. So it's not just about shutting everyone out, it's actually about incorporating all the things that we already do in those areas, but trying to limit any of the damage that we could cause through our actions. So what I'd like you to do is get onto 365 in the Jog Vlogs folder. You will find a map of the UK's national parks, but it's blank, so I want you to label them all accurately. So make sure you do that first. The next thing I'd like you to do is add the background information from this slide, so the top 3 lines of the picture you can see on your screen now. Then I'd like you to use the Highland Cow Glossary, if you've got that available, or just the internet, to define sustainable development, to make sure you define sustainable development, what that is. Again, if you've got access to the Highland Cow textbook, this would probably be the easiest way to fill the information, but page 284 just describes what national park management plans are, but once again you will be able to actually look this up on the internet fairly easily. Then complete the table at the bottom of the handout, and then on the next slide that I'm going to show you, it's going to give you a bit of detail about the population density found near to some of the national parks. So because you've got this national parks map in front of you, it gives you the ability to just match up this with areas of upland and lowland, which we found from the UK landscapes topic, and population density. Okay, so you're going to be using the next slide to help complete that bit. And also use that next slide to link it to, I mentioned this, upland and lowland areas. So what I want you to do is complete the information up to the table at the bottom of the handout. And then when you're ready, and when I've moved on from this, using this map, I'd like you to colour code it. So try and work out a way you can put population density information near these national parks, and then try and come up with a way that you can shade it maybe to show areas of upland and lowland regions within this area of Great Britain. Okay, so I'm going to go over so do the stuff to complete this section to begin with. Then when you're ready, unpause the screen and we can add the stuff to the map on the next slide. Okay, so the map's on the next slide. On the left-hand side, you've got population density, so you should be able to identify that this is London, and there are certain other places like here, this is Birmingham, and you've got the northwest up here, so Manchester, Liverpool area. Some of these areas, and Newcastle up here as well, some of these areas are very near to some of the national parks on your map. So you will find that the Yorkshire Dales, for example, and the Lake District are fairly close to, the Lake District up there, but fairly close to these population centres of the north. You will find that places like the South Downs and the Norfolk Broads are quite close to places like London, the Brecon Beacons close to Cardiff, and Northumberland very much close to Newcastle upon Tyne. So there are certainly areas within the UK map which I'd like you to just highlight as areas of densely populated places which are close to national parks. And the reason I want you to do that is because I want you to make the link between threats to those national parks and the people that are close by. Now, I'm not saying everyone in London's got it in for the Norfolk Broads. What I am saying is that if they're close enough to the Norfolk Broads, they're going to visit a lot, and the more visitors, the more pressure there is. I'd also like you to try and annotate your map to show upland regions, which are these sort of dark brown, yellowy coloured regions, and lowland regions, which are the green areas. Okay, so shade your map in some way, just again so you can associate the national parks with upland and lowland portions. A couple of areas, or a couple of national parks are specifically located where there is upland areas. So for example, up here, this little patch, that's where the North York Moors are found. Down here, you've got Dartmoor, and up here, you've got Exmoor. Both of them coincide with these upland areas. Okay, so some of them are a bit less straightforward, but a lot of them do link to upland areas. The Cairngorms up here, again, very much strongly linked with a very mountainous region of Scotland. So this map just really shows you how this topic links in with the UK changing landscapes topic, and this map on the left shows you how it links in with the changing cities topic. Okay, so when you're ready, once you've added this to your map, so you've got a detailed overview, you're ready to unpause the screen, and then we'll crack on with the rest of the session. Okay, so now we're looking at river flooding risk in the UK. We've covered the national parks, and you've got a really good overview about what the national parks are, what conservation is, what the national park strategies are, those 5-year plans. Flood risk in the UK from rivers is something which is just an ongoing issue. And there is on the Jog Vlogs folder of 365 a video which has got this link. Okay, it's another YouTube video there, so you can click on or type in that link, or save yourself a bit of typing, just get onto the Jog Vlogs folder of 365 and find it. So it's clearly one of the landscape challenges facing the UK, because when rivers flood, they flood massive chunks of landscape. And as of right now, about 330,000 homes are at risk of flooding in the UK. Now that risk is going up all the time, and it's set to increase by 2080 to be between 600,000 and 1.2 million homes. And that's only going to get worse if patterns of climate change and weather patterns associated with that continue as they are projected to do. So, why is flood risk increasing? And this is something you should write down all for your notes, please. First and foremost, there's more of us. Okay, the population is increasing, and we know this from the first two challenges. We've actually tied in population increase into both of them. So clearly, population increase is a problem, and it's something we need to try and manage. But because our population is increasing, we need more houses. So if we need more houses, we're going to create more impermeable surfaces. And some of the places we're going to build are going to be floodplain areas, places that flood anyway. So that's one thing, we're going to be building more because we've got more people. Another issue that we've got with regards to greater population is that the more people there are, the greater the risk of those people being affected is. Because as the population grows, generally speaking, flood risk increases because there are more people for the flood to affect, if that makes sense. So, for example, if the UK wasn't populated, it wouldn't matter how many times it flooded because no one is at risk. So flood risk would essentially be zero because the UK's population is zero. So as soon as you've got more people, you increase your risk because there are more people to be affected by flooding. So we've already mentioned about urbanisation in general as well. So the growth of housing leads to more impermeable surfaces, greater runoff, so that is going to actually increase the likelihood that a flood is going to happen. So as well as risk increasing because there's more of us, risk is also increasing because we're building on floodplain land and creating those impermeable surfaces. And then finally, something I already alluded to, climate change is sort of projected to show that these intense rainfall events are going to become more commonplace. And as a result, we are more likely to suffer flooding events. So, write all this information on the slide down so you've got a really good introduction to river flooding risk in the UK. And once you've written it down, unpause the screen and we'll continue with the next part. Okay, so managing river flooding in the UK is something we've covered in the UK landscapes section. So this whole topic really is very strongly linked to the UK landscapes section, topic 1 of paper 1. So you should know all about already hard engineering and soft engineering strategies like dams and reservoirs, levees, afforestation, land use zoning and washlands. Okay. The Environment Agency, and this is a summary really on the left hand side of what the Environment Agency do with regards to river flooding and how they work with the Met Office to use social media to warn people. This is again something which I'm not going to spend any time on other than just to summarise for you, because if you really want to get detailed information about managing UK river flooding, then you need to get yourself onto the paper 1 topic 1 summary or paper 1 topic 1 the latter stages of the actual playlist for that entire topic, which deals in a bit more depth in hard and soft engineering strategies and their advantages and disadvantages. A case study, however, that you don't have is the Somerset Levels flood. So this is fairly recent, happened within the last decade, and the Somerset Levels flood was pretty devastating in terms of the damage it caused. Some would argue it's not as devastating as perhaps some other floods that have happened historically, but the fact that Somerset housed quite a lot of wealthy landowners meant that, well, it was potentially prioritised more, and there were other reasons as well. That's a bit of a controversial viewpoint. So effectively the Somerset Levels flooding, you can pick the date here because actually the Somerset Levels flooding of 2014 or 15 or 13-14, I think it's 14-15. I think I've got my date wrong on the title there, sorry about that. It's got different sections here: physical factors that affected flooding, human factors that affected the flooding. Now, by affected flooding, I mean what kind of helped cause it or contribute in some way to the flood. So physical factors, we mainly talk about rainfall patterns. Okay, and human factors, we're looking at building on floodplains, maybe urban areas within the landscape. That might be what we're looking at there. So try and link in physical and human factors that lead to and maybe are affected by the flooding in some way. Then there are the impacts of flooding, so the social, economic and environmental impacts of flooding. So try and divide up the impacts into these 3 categories. Environmental affects habitats and species, so think of like, I don't know, cars that get flooded or sewers that overflow, the raw sewage that then goes onto the landscape. Economic factors are to do with money and jobs, so money lost through repair or land value declining because it was flooded, etc. Social impacts are basically everything else: people's happiness, roads, infrastructure, hospitals, schools, that sort of stuff. Okay, but if you can get environmental and economic, everything else is basically social. Management and future flood protection. What is going on in the Somerset Levels floods to try and, or Somerset Levels area, to try and help manage future flooding? Okay, and you can see that one of these things is stop the flooding, dredge the rivers. That's one of the strategies that they want to employ. You know, keep the rivers' capacity as high as it possibly can be to deal with the flooding. And what conflicts have arisen with regards to the Somerset Levels flood. Okay, I've alluded to some of them, but there's obviously a bit of a conflict between the people that live in the Somerset Levels area wanting to dredge the rivers and what the Environment Agency are actually doing, because the Environment Agency are a bit hesitant to so regularly dredge rivers that are going to keep on flooding. So they want to try and work out a slightly more long-term management strategy which doesn't maybe cost them loads and loads of money year upon year. So this summary sheet is going to give you all the information that you really need to have about the Somerset Levels flood, but you are going to be required to actually do this. Now, if you've got the Highland Cow textbook, that's great because there's loads of information about that. But you have the internet at home, so ICT will also give you information. But what I want to see is just focusing on using these categories, and bullet points are totally fine as long as they're not too brief that you lose the thread of what you're talking about. But bullet points are totally fine. It might take you about 20 minutes of research time, but it's definitely worth it. And this will be a very well documented flood, and you can double check the date is 2014 and 15. Okay, so that is the task I'd like you to do to start with. Once you finish that task, you can then look at UK coastal challenges, so UK coastal flooding risk. So the map you've got on the screen now is a map of, it's a map of Great Britain pretty much, and every area that's orange is a place at risk of coastal flooding. Needless to say, it's near the coast, so that makes a big difference. But it's another landscape challenge which is affecting large amounts, and if you combine it with river flooding, the UK is a place where there is hundreds of thousands of houses at risk, and I've already given you the stats with regards to the fact that by 2080 they reckon it'll be over 1 million houses at risk. So storm surges, that is really what this is kind of building towards, and the storm surge of 1953, which is very well documented, was about 5 metres high in terms of kind of how high the water went, and it led to the deaths of over 300 people in the United Kingdom, largely around the kind of East Anglian region, okay, and Canvey Island as well specifically, because of a storm surge. So high tides in the area, plus low pressure causing a bulge to appear in the ocean because the air was moving up away from it, reduced the pressure on it, and strong winds all combined alongside the funnel effect, which pushed the North Sea into a smaller gap between East Anglia and the Netherlands on the other side of the North Sea, and that led to this massive, several hundreds of people dying in a horrible event in sort of January 31st of 1953. But we have since then had a bigger storm surge event. In 2013, we had a storm surge event that was actually over 6 metres in Cromer and East Anglia, but it killed about 2 people. Now, the reason it only killed about 2 people is because we are better prepared than ever. We've got flood defences, and we're going to be starting to look at one of those flood defences in a bit. Make sure you've obviously got the Rivers Somerset Levels case study completed. This is now where we're going to be writing some more extra notes on what storm surges are. You do have detail on storm surges in the UK Changing Landscapes topic area, so please make sure you refer back to your notes on that, or the job vlogs folder with that information on. And then when you've got these notes written down, then you can unpause the screen and we'll crack on with the next part of the Coastal Flooding Challenge. Okay, so this is a comparison really of the 1953 and the 2013 storm surge events. And you can see here that the 1953 storm surge affected sort of large parts of East Anglia, that's over here, okay, and the Netherlands as well. This white bit is not a country, that's just the English Channel, okay, but you can see just how much the surge level rose to. Now, in 2013, it was a very high sea, nearly 6 metres in terms of peak sea level. That was recorded at Hull, just over here, okay, on this little dot. But you can see all the different stats and facts and figures related to the 2013 storm surge. But the fact that very few people died is a bit of testament to just how the Environment Agency have done in terms of protecting us against sea level rise and, well, temporary sea level rise in terms of storm surges. So 326 people died in the UK anyway. It was over 1,000 people died overall when you include the Netherlands as well, and 30,000 evacuations plus £1.2 billion worth of damage in today's value. The 2013 storm surge was similar in terms of damage. It was 1.3 billion pounds in damage, quite it's quite significant. But far fewer evacuations. Nearly half the number of evacuations. In terms of the number of properties affected, it was almost the same. Well, the properties affected was in the small low thousands, maybe 1,600, whereas the actual properties protected is nearly 800,000, and that's the Environment Agency just really blowing their own trumpet, and rightly so, because they've done a really good thing with regards to the 2013 storm surge. So there is a video attached to this as well. You can see it just appearing on your screen on the link, but it's on the Jog Vlogs folder of 365, just to give you some footage really of the 2013 storm surge, which at the height of it reached up to the level of Cromer Pier, like literally where you walk on the pier, got up to that high. So pretty big deal if you know Cromer. Okay, now the management strategy that we specifically want you to look at with regards to the North Sea storm surge of 2013 involves the Thames flood barrier, which is an image you can see there, but the information is included in the Jog Vlogs folder of 365, so you need to find it, okay, because all the information is done for you. You just have to kind of just classify it, whether the information is a cause of the storm surge, an impact of the storm surge, or a solution to the storm surge. Okay, so causes, impact, solutions, 3 different colours of highlighter. Make sure you put a key on there, and all the information for that particular case study is done. So you've had to do all the Somerset level stuff yourself through your own research, and so to pay you back, I've given you all the information you need for the UK storm surge of 2013. You just have to highlight it a bit. Okay, now pause the screen while you're doing that, please, and when you're ready you can unpause the screen, and we'll just sort of finish off the session. Okay, so the 2 factors that I'd like you to consider when it comes to why managed retreat or managed realignment as a coastal strategy, which again we've looked at in the UK landscapes topic, is considered a good long-term option to protect us against coastal flooding, is because if we allow the land to flood naturally from storm surges, it will create habitats and defences like effectively like dune systems. Okay, areas that flood naturally. That will also create lovely habitats and things like that. But unfortunately, managed realignment or managed retreat isn't great in the sense of kind of for today. And the reason it's not good for today is because people have already started to build houses. Years ago, they built houses in these areas which they're planning just to allow to retreat or flood. So as they're built in those areas now, those people are just going to lose their homes. So they have to weigh up whether managed retreat is a good idea based on how many people live there and how much worth the land has. If we're talking about London, then they're going to protect it, and that's why they built the Thames flood barrier, this multi-million-pound project, which has been used over 150 times, by the way. So they've got their money's worth out of it since it was built in like 1982. So they've got their money out of it, but it's there to protect billions and billions and billions of valued worth of land in London. But Haysborough, poor Haysborough, is not a place where there's a great deal of financial kind of value. There's lots of cultural value, but not many people live there. Not worth a lot in terms of its kind of economic value, and so it's not worth the government spending money protecting when they've got limited amounts of money. And that's obviously a bit of a contentious debate, and it's also why this is a UK's sort of a landscape challenge, because it's the challenge of, do we protect that land or do we give it a long-term solution, and in the meantime accept there's going to be some collateral damage there. Okay, so just to finish off this session, there is a little exam question that I'd like you to try. I've given you plenty of practice on these throughout the sessions over the course of all the topics, so I'd like you to do this without much guidance from me, please. Suggest 2 ways coastal flood risk in the UK could be managed. Okay, so this is you can go back to your UK landscapes notes if you want, but we're looking at coastal flood risk specifically. So how could coastal flood risk in the UK be managed? And think of 2 ways, if you can, where you name the way and explain how it's going to help manage that flood risk. Alright, so once you've completed that, you have completed this session. So well done for getting through the 3rd of 4 UK challenges. There are 2 more sessions to go in this series of videos, and 1 more UK challenge followed by a voluntary, if you're doing this at home anyway, assessment bit of work. All right, so thank you for listening. I'll see you next time for another jog vlog.